Welcome to Exchange.JS. This is our December meeting. I hope you all are doing fine these days. All right, so I'm Abram Hindle and I will be emceeing Exchange.JS tonight. We're going to talk about JavaScript. Okay, so first up, code of conduct. We're using Remo, so you get to sit at tables, and when there's not a presentation, you get to interact with people live. We're going to go news, then we'll do talks, and then we'll socialize at tables in Remo after the talk. Okay, so by attending, you agree to our code of conduct. Our code of conduct is a hyperlink, which you can't click on the video, but I can always paste it in the chat. So if you want to read it, there it is. I'll summarize it as be respectful and nice to everyone. So that's about it. So be kind, be patient, be awesome. That's probably a better summary than I gave it. That's basically what the code of conduct says. So try to keep up with that. And now we are using Remo, so we can actually interact with each other. But later, what you might want to do is might want to join the Dev Edmonton Slack if you haven't already. And then you can join our Meetup channel, which is Meetup Exchange.JS. Yeah, and you can find the Dev Edmonton Slack at the devedmontonsociety.com, which is devedmonton.com. Well, it's amazing that I can talk in the vacuum of space, so hopefully something's working. All right. Be aware that some of this might be on YouTube. Not sure what. The stuff at your table won't be, but the presentation might be. Yeah, space telepathy. All right. So in JavaScript news for the month, Angular 11 came out. So that was new. And TypeScript 4.1, which I assume they're quite related, as well as Electron.js. So a bunch of big frameworks, big changes. That is pretty neat. I'm not sure what happened with Angular, what's new with it, but yeah. So what's new in Angular 11? As far as I can tell, they have test harnesses. They're supporting the new TypeScript, so TypeScript 4.0 and maybe 4.1. I'm not sure. Webpack, and they moved to ESLint. So that's pretty neat. So lots of fun Angular stuff. All that good jazz. All right, Ian says that the new Angular is more simple, apparently. Given my prior experience with Angular, I look forward to that, but I remain skeptical. All right, more simple. Okay, so that's a relative measurement. You want to join us on Dev Edmonton? Dev Edmonton is a society, and it is an Alberta society and is meant to support developers and developer meetups. You can go to devedmonton.com and see our new webpage and see what we're up to. And you can join our Slack, which hosts Exchange.JS. And Exchange.JS is part of Dev Edmonton. They basically act like a bank account for Exchange.JS. So when we meet in real life, we can have pizza, because pizza without a bank account is kind of hard. Our next meetup will be with the Ruby meetup. It'll be a joint meetup, and it'll be on January 7th, 2020, and it'll be on Remo. So we'll be talking about JavaScript and Ruby, and they're very related. So it's a joint meetup, 2 speakers, 2 talks, real fun, dueling MCs, battling in an arena. Well, maybe no arena, but we'll see. All right. On that topic, we do need speakers, and we always need speakers. So if you're thinking that you want to learn a new framework, what better way to learn a new framework? I got to read this. Ian said, 2 languages enter, 2 languages leave. So it's very cordial. Okay. But we do want speakers, and speaking is one of the greatest ways to learn a new framework that you wanted to try out. Nothing makes you learn it good other than having to actually talk to others about it. And you can just admit to other people you don't know anything about it, and that's the whole purpose of this. Yeah. So we do want speakers. If you're interested, come talk to us, exchange.js.com/talks. And we definitely can do short talks, long talks. demos, tutorials, showing off a project, all that kind of fun stuff, even panel discussions if you want to set that up. So we're very open in the format. Also activities. So if you're like, well, let's make JavaScript Christmas trees. Okay, sounds good. You want to lead that? We can do that. Or you can make a language arena for January or something. So anything along those lines. So the main attraction, please contact us for talks. But we've got Stephen Rockarts. He's going to talk to us about JavaScript security from beginning to remote code execution. And now I got to figure out how to invite someone to the stage.
All right, just let me know when to start.
Go for it.
I'm good? Okay. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I'm going to continue on. If there's any issues, just please cut in, because I won't be able to see the chat. So we'll start the presentation. So I did change the name of it a bit. It's JavaScript Security, Exploring Prototype Pollution Vulnerability, just because the whole thing is basically centered around prototype pollution. So, and I'm going to continue on with the space theme with a picture of the Helix Nebula. So who's this guy? My name is Stephen Rockarts. I'm a mobile developer working with React Native at Punchcard Systems. If you're interested, we're hiring. Please come work with us. You get to work with me, Ian, and I think half the other people here from Punchcard. So thanks for showing up. Yeah, Ian was reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're desperate for presenters, so you guys are all stuck with me." So yeah, I've got besides programming, I like doing a lot of capture the flag competitions, and I try to do bug bounties when I can. I'm also part of the YegSec community, and a lot of web pen testing ends up crossing over with JavaScript and being able to exploit it. If this presentation interests you, feel free to join the YegSec community as well and join in on some capture the flag competitions. It's a lot of fun. The goal of it is basically to exploit a vulnerability and find a flag, and you get points for it. It's pretty fun. I'm also the organizer of the mobile dev community. So if you're a JavaScript mobile developer and you work with React Native or another JavaScript framework for mobile, we'd love to have you come present there as well. So yeah, lots of opportunities to present these days. I've also got some weird other hobbies. I'm a beekeeper. I like messing around on aerial straps in the circus, and I'm a climber. And this summer, I just got my paragliding license, so just in time for winter. So next summer, I'll be doing that a lot too. So let's just start off with the basics of prototype pollution. Probably a lot of you know this already, but when you create an empty object in JavaScript, you just don't get an empty object. You get a lot of these other default properties on the object. And that's just because despite how hard everyone's trying these days, JavaScript just isn't a object-oriented language. It's a prototype language. So what that means is you get these fancy default properties with every object you create by default. And you can overwrite them, which is what prototype pollution is. So a basic example of this is we create an object named dog. Then we assign to the prototype we assign to the prototype the bark property, and we assign it the string meow. And then when you say dog dot bark, every new dog object will say meow. Actually, every object. So, and then if we assign it to dog the bounty hunter, dog the bounty hunter says meow, and that's the my paint skills or Photoshop skills. So an example of this using JavaScript would be if you have some user input, say from a text box, and it gets parsed. So it's parsed as it's sent in as a string, but it gets parsed using the JSON object into an object. So what we're doing here is we're overwriting the admin property using the prototype with the value true. And then what happens is when you assign it to a new object or an empty object, everything with the admin property is going to be set to true. And HackerMan's very proud because everybody is admin now. And then so what happens is people sometimes might think, we use TypeScript, we're safe. But I'm sure this joke's been made, or you've probably seen it as a TypeScript developer. TypeScript will let you do things anyway. So I think that's a perfect picture of how to describe TypeScript. So when you use TypeScript and the spread operator, it's actually transpiled to object.assign, which is merging the two objects. So this is kind of neat because if you were to try this exact same code in JavaScript, it wouldn't work. But when you try it in TypeScript, because it gets transpiled down to object.assign, it actually does work. And I left that part out, but admin would actually be true in this case. So now I'll get to the fun part. There's basically, if you want to try your security pen testing skills, there's a site called Try Hack Me, and it will give you basically a room which is set up with a known vulnerability, and it's your the challenge is for you to find the vulnerability, find what exists on that server, and then to exploit it. So it's a good place to practice. When it's really good too because they start out from complete beginner to extra super hard rooms that only a few people can crack. And there's different paths you can take along the way that will kind of guide you through everything. I should also say, when I show this to you, just remember that there is a computer code of conduct. If you use this for evil purposes, you will be breaking the law. So if you use this to attack anybody or in a black hat manner, you will get prosecuted by the law if they catch you. The purpose of this talk is to show you how it works so that when you're writing your own JavaScript code, it's in the back of your mind. Quite often, everybody's racing to develop and develop and develop. And there's not really barely ever is there a time where management says, hey, you know what? Let's take 10 more sprints just to focus on security. Maybe if you get super big or if you get attacked, they'll say that. But if you have these techniques in the back of your mind while you're coding, you'll know how to prevent, you'll know how to defend against them and what not to do. Sometimes it's just a matter of education and you get security built in while you're coding. So this room, to get back to Try Hack Me, this room exploits CVE 2019 7609. CVE stands for Common Vulnerability. Oh, I can't remember what the E stands for, but it just basically you get a number and it's known and it's shared with both whoever makes the product and the rest of the world, and people learn from it, and the developers get an opportunity to patch it. So this was in a product called Kibana, and it allows a person to have arbitrary code execution. So what that means is you're logged in the machine and you can do anything you want. It's kind of like giving somebody remote desktop access to your machine or SSH access to your machine without you knowing it. And so it used a flaw in the timeline visualizer. I'll kind of show you what that is in a sec. And an attacker, they could send a request that would execute JavaScript code. And the way it did, the way that the author of this CVE figured this out is just, it blows my mind. It's very clever. And we'll go through all the steps that they use to do that. So Kibana, I'm not sure how many people have used it, but it's an open source UI that lets you visualize basically data, any data you can collect. Elasticsearch will index it for you, and you can just basically explore your data in a user interface. So here's kind of a look of what it looks like. This is the timeline, it's called. Yeah, and it's a terrible pun on names. Sorry, Kibana people. But it's basically, so if you look at the top here, .es, it allows you to basically query your data on the back end, and then it allows you to put labels onto it. So the last hour, current hour that you see there, and then the data is visualized across the screen. Cool thing about this is you can take this data and reuse it in other parts of Kibana, which is also not good, as you'll see in a bit. So just a brief overview. And then it also exploits something called Canvas. Canvas is a data visualization and presentation tool that sits inside Kibana. And it allows you can basically pull series data from timeline into Canvas. And it allows you to do some really neat visualizations. It's kind of it's a GIF I stole from their website. So having a little bit of information about prototype pollution and the way it works, this is basically the payload that executes everything that causes the damage. Quite often, payloads can look very confusing and scary until you start breaking them down into pieces. So what we'll do is we'll go through this line. We'll break it up into kind of readable chunks so we can figure out what's going on. And to back up a bit, this line of code here, or this line of data, is what you paste into the timeline visualizer, and it gets executed. So what happens is you have .es star, which is, if you know SQL really well, it's basically selects from all the data sources in Elasticsearch. It's just basically like a select star. So it's bringing back all the data contained in your app. And then it has .props, and then they have the label is, if we back up a few slides, that last hour, current hour, that is the label. So it allows you to, the purpose of it was to allow you to customize the strings that go into that data. But what the developer, the person who developed this payload figured out is that you could set not just strings on the label, you could set objects. So they end up setting the prototype value and the dot environment variable to dot AAA. So that'll come into play further on in the payload. But basically, it's creating an environment variable with code to start a bash shell using a new node process. So a bash shell or a reverse shell is basically a remote shell into another computer, which you can listen for, and then once you connect to it, you can execute commands on that computer, and you basically own the computer. So then they have a require statement in the payload, and they're requiring child process, and then they're executing. So the bash-c is for command, and then it opens up that reverse shell. So that whole line, the require child process, if you were to write that in Node, it kicks off a new process, which allows you to execute. You could execute, well, you can execute a reverse shell, or you could execute other programs on the computer with it. So it starts a new process, and then it's listening on the IP address 127.0.0.1 and port quad 6. So that's that part of the payload. Then after it, it also sets the node options. It sets the prototype on that. So they're manipulating the environment object, and it's doing another require. The reason that they're doing this is if they were to, they need something to execute code, right? They need to execute this child process. So when you require something from using node options from the command line, it doesn't just run. So you can require a script, but it won't run it right away. If you require this proc self environ, it lives on Linux systems, and it's just a list of all the environment variables on the machine. Inside that is, it causes it to be read, so that .aaa and starting the bash shell, it just causes that code to be executed right away, because when you require something, it will be run right when you require it. So this allows the attacker to not have to wait. It just executes the code right away, and they get a reverse shell. So it's pretty slick. It's pretty cool. So this is going to happen really fast, and I'll try and explain it as fast as I can. I took a video because I had to log into the Try Hack Me room. But what happens is you paste that payload here into the timeline visualizer. And the part I guess I kind of skipped over is if you click on the canvas loads a new node process. So the node process is actually, you have to basically set up this this prototype payload, and then when you go over to the canvas in Kibana, it will execute the code. So what we're going to do is I've just done a if config to figure out my IP address, and then I'm going to plug it into the reverse shell, and I'm going to listen, and then I'm going to paste the code in and execute it on Kibana. So you can just see I just point out here that that's my IP address. So I just set up a listener using Netcat to listen for my reverse shell calling home. So it's running and it's listening. So it's waiting for my payload. So the difference too between the one I showed you in the slides and here is that I've changed my IP address and I'm listening on port 6666. So you can see it just at the bottom there. There's the user input basically is the .es area, and there's my empty chart. So once you if we were doing this without trying to exploit it, we'd be building a time series visualization. So we paste it in, we get a terrible chart that says there's no data basically, and just open my window, and then I run the code, execute the JavaScript. It's really subtle, but you can see that the timeline visualizer changed to object to object. So we've just polluted all the objects in here with our payload. And then what happens is we click on the canvas, and the canvas is going to go into those node options, those environment variables, and it's going to run using basically a new node process and executing our child process that we've passed into the node process that's getting spawned by Canvas. It's going to start our reverse shell. It takes a sec. Bam, you can see right there, we've got a reverse shell on the Kibana machine. So we went from just a bit of prototype pollution to it going all the way into node spawning our shell. So we can say, who am I, to figure out what user we're running at. The good thing about this server, well, in TryHackMe, they usually give you a user and then it's up to you to privilege escalate to get to a root user. So they have it set up segmented. This is why you should never set up your programs using root. So we're the Kiba user, and then we can actually go to the home. So in capture the flag competitions, you're always looking for this user.text, and then it contains your flag, which you can use to get points. So that's our flag. And then if you were super malicious, if it was a bad actor, they would be, able to put remote persistence on the computer or root around your network, steal data, hit you with ransomware. The possibilities are endless. So just something to think about. So that's basically going from JavaScript code to remote execution. But there's also, so with prototype pollution, you can do a number of things. In this extreme case that we just looked at, you get remote code execution. You could also use it to cause a denial of service, or you can use it to, like in the very first case with dog, you can use it to modify properties. So the contrived example that most people show is there's a flag called like isAdmin, and they just set it from false to true, and then suddenly they've got super awesome privileges on the machine. But yeah, I mean, I was going through some code on a bug bounty a couple nights ago, and they actually had a property called is logged in. So using prototype pollution, you can do that. So clients, I guess, just be aware that if you can modify them, it can open some doors to do some bad things that you might not expect. So in this case, you can cause a denial of service on the same application, so on Kibana, by just if you find a property and pollute it with something that it doesn't expect, like us here at Exchange.JS. This will happen really quick, but you can bring down the whole application. So we run the same code, and you'll see it change the objects. So we know that our prototype pollution has worked. We've changed those properties. And then we go to the dashboard. Oh man, now our IT guys hate us because everyone all of a sudden starts trying to access the app, and the whole service has been brought down, and they don't know why. So yeah, they won't be your friend if this happens. So prevention, how to prevent against this. Just before this, we were trying to come up with an example using React on how we could exploit it. And we were thinking about, if you get some user input and we were to take that user input string, and then in most of the apps we're creating these days, that data is going to get saved off to the back end somewhere, and then or to an API somewhere, and then you're going to use you'll probably use a JSON.parse, or maybe something like Axios will do that for you, and it will turn it into your object. And then if your object is polluted, then you're basically going to have this DDoS. So yeah, that can happen. So what you can do to prevent it is, I think, schema validation on JSON input. So think about, quite often people do threat modeling on their apps, and they'll think of everywhere that people can enter an input. So if I'm doing bug bounties, I'm thinking about every text box that's on your website, and I'm also looking totally past your application. If I can find out the API that it's calling, then I can inject that string using a simple post request. And maybe if your JSON schema validation is on the front end, then I bypass that check and just go straight to the back end. And then it's like reflected XSS, cross-site scripting. It gets brought back every time it gets called. So if you had like a grid of objects and they all had names, and I polluted the name field, you would get that denial of service in your app, and it'd bring the whole thing down. So you can also check has own property. You can freeze objects after they've been created. A lot of these vulnerabilities that people come up with, they're from using merge. So when you merge two objects together, they're merging a really safe one with one that's unsafe. So if you look around, I think it was Lodash had this vulnerability. There was actually another interesting way to use prototype pollution was there was an ORM. So it was taking basically the values from the JSON object and running them against the database, and they were able to pollute that JavaScript object with SQL injection. So they were able to use it to just to execute SQL and bring back everything and bring back all the data in the system. That's how your data breaches happen, I guess. So yeah, I mean, just be aware of it. Even, I guess, back at the beginning when we were showing this TypeScript, like the spread operator is kind of something that you just implicitly trust, and it's in a lot of beginner tutorials on, hey, we need some properties from object A to object B. So we're just gonna use the spread operator, but under the covers, when it's transpiled, it's using an object.assign. So it's actually like I don't know how you. I'm not telling you to go and inspect everything that your TypeScript gets transpiled to. Is just I guess being aware of these. The other things you can do is just make sure to update your dependencies all the time. This Cabana issue was patched. So if you're using this old version, quite often people who are looking to attack your application are just looking for all the dependencies that you've brought in. So, and then using those to attack it instead of trying to understand and read your code. They know that Lodash or jQuery has this in it in a certain version, and if they can find out that your application is running that version, then they'll just go that way because it's a known vulnerability. So make sure to patch your applications as much as you can, and keep things updated. Keep your security guys happy. So just some resources. Basically a lot of this presentation is actually just reading through. I did the room on Try Hack Me, and when you're searching for ways to exploit it, you come across this article from Mikhail Bentowski, and he has a really great explanation of this, and the presentation is much better than mine. So all the credit to him for this. And if you want to follow along and do it, there's a really good YouTube video by John Hammond. He's pretty well known in the cybersecurity community, and he will walk you through all the steps you need to do this yourself and practice it. But yeah, I encourage you to go try it on. Try Hack Me yourself. And if this interests you, there's it really helps to educate yourself and know just how your application can be attacked. And the best way by doing that is attacking applications. So Try Hack Me has, similar to, I think it's the Advent of Code, they have basically challenges all the way up until Christmas. We're only on day 3 because it's December 3rd. So it starts out with really easy things, and you just walk through something every day until Christmas this year. So it's a good way to go practice. So that is my presentation.
All right. Well, thank you for your presentation. Let's do questions. So questions from the audience. So the first question is YegSec. Is it yegsec.ca? Is that our best resource for dealing with YegSec?
Yeah, Yegs. I can't remember what the yegsec.ca. Yeah, and yeah, there's the Slack. Come in there and join the CTF room. It's a really friendly community. As I was fairly intimidated the first time I went there. You think, oh, it's a bunch of hackers, but it's a bunch of people who just want you to learn and be able to protect yourself. And it's kind of fun.
All right.
Oh, and if you need an invite, also let me know you need an invite because they're trying to screen who comes in and who doesn't.
So Ian asks, would programming newcomers be welcome?
Yes, of course. You kind of have a bit of a leg up with a programming background. Be you'll catch on to things a little quicker, and I think what's good about it is it kind of gets you a lot of the hacking practice or CTF practice brings you back to the basics. So being able to convert from binary to hex to to knowing encoding and encoding strings and XSS vulnerabilities and stuff. Just kind of you get a really deep understanding of what your code's doing at a low level. So.
Okay. Eugene asks, do the exploits covered in the group for specific languages, or are the exploits in the group for specific languages, or is it more general?
So it depends. I guess my advice is, I think everyone is here because you're a JavaScript developer. You love working with JavaScript. So I would say like you'd probably enjoy doing web penetration testing, and you'd learn a lot just about how your page is interacting and how it's attacked. But there's like you can get into binary exploitation, which would be basically knowing how C compiles to assembly. So a lot of people, it's hard to get good at everything. So a lot of people specialize, and then we form teams, capture the flag teams to with people who are strong in all areas. And then if there's a problem in that area, we're like, hey, it's on you. You solve this. So.
Mm-hmm. All right. We got another question. Andrew asks, can prototype pollution be completely prevented by sanitizing JSON for proto, or are there other ways around that?
Yeah, a lot of people check that they'll check has own property, so to make sure that that you're not going lower, like down the prototype chain, because JavaScript will start at the top. If it doesn't find the property, it will go down the next chain or the next everything in the prototype chain. So that it could be, if you're on top of a framework, a really long way down before it finds a project or the property that it wants. So some people are like, hey, when they write their merge functions, they'll say, don't merge proto.
Okay. Nate asks a question. I don't know if you have any control over this. Would you be interested in making a YegSec Slack channel on the Dev Edmonton Slack?
Man, I don't know. I wasn't the one who started it, so I don't really, I think it's, they have their own
Andrew
separate Slack. So I think it's because things you learn could be really harmful. So they actually require you to have an invite to join. And that's just their way of kind of making sure people aren't using it for evil. But it's, I mean, I can vouch for you if you'd like to join the community.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, and like Ian said, some people want to be anonymous. They won't use their real names. Although Slack kind of makes that hard. If you turn on that feature, it will show everybody's real names.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Yeah, there's some discussion. Okay, so I think if there's no further questions, I will just ask one question, which was just because I kind of missed it. You injected via JSON, right? And you inject into the prototype. And you're running shell. Did you have to require something to get the shell access? I don't remember.
Yeah, it was. I didn't really explain it too well, but Canvas, if you read the guy's paper on it, he noticed that Canvas is spawning a new node process when you click on the link. So he's like, this is my way to get access to the server, because Node will be running on the server, right? It's not restricted to client side. So when you require, the trick was when if you try to do if you try and spawn a new Node instance on the command line, and you say eval console.log 123, it'll say, hey, you're not allowed to run eval. So his way around that is he shoves that payload, or the bash payload, into that environment variable. And when he requires it, they just implicitly trusted the environment variables coming in, and they execute the code there. So you could write a whole program and shove it in that, well, depending on the length, but you could write a program and execute it using an environment variable. It's pretty creative.
I was seeing that not just proto and not just underscore proto but constructor can also be dangerous too. So if you're doing it by hand and not using map or something like that, like capital M map, you can run into problems.
Yeah, I think it's basically any property that's on that object you get. So I've seen people use toString and try to do reflected XSS with the toString, because they're just like, hey, somebody's probably calling the default toString. So if they overwrite that with their XSS, then but this, so I think the caveat to this is that was a very roundabout kind of contrived way to execute this, to get like everything, the stars, with your space script background, the stars aligned perfectly for this guy to be able to do it, right? We're not, well, as far as I know, a lot of the applications we run aren't just spawning node processes out of the blue. So he kind of had the perfect storm to be able to do this. The SQL injection with the typo RM, that was kind of a more of a real world example. My coworker and I, we were trying to come up with an example using React, but we couldn't get it to work. So, and it felt a bit too contrived. So you have to know, I guess, a lot about the code base to be able to do it.
Well, it's the first time anything in the Elasticsearch ecosystem has had such an exploit. Like, they had a serious one before they invented mvel back in the day.
Yeah, I think like you can still, you can still decompile. One of the things that's really interesting to me is this might sound like a humble brag, but I have the new Mac, the M1, and you can download from the App Store and run iPhone apps. So the bug bounty I was working on, you can just right click on the app now and open it up and view the bundled React code inside of it. So if you can take that and pretty print it, you're reading maybe a little bit of obfuscated code, but a little bit of renaming, and you can understand what it's doing and trying to do.
Yeah, I guess it would be dangerous for any kind of app like that, where it's like, oh, type in the name of the property that's being saved and type in the value, and you're like, okay,
yeah.
underscore proto underscore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this, like, the reason I wanted to present on it is because it's getting a lot more, just kind of having my ear to the ground in the security community. It's getting a lot more popular these days. I've noticed it popping up in capture the flag competitions and rooms on Try Hack Me. It's been around forever. It was in jQuery. It was a vulnerability there, and it's just the way JavaScript works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you're going to keep it as an object, it's going to act like an object.
Yeah.
All right. I don't see any further questions. Do you have any last statement before we move on?
No, if you're interested, reach out to me, and yeah. And if you like cool stuff like this, feel free to apply a punch card.
Great. That segues into stuff that's coming up next. Just let me share. Okay. All right. And I am going to... All right. So you just got to stick around for a little bit. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. I don't mind.
Okay. So Dev Edmonton Society has a meeting coming up on December 9th. You can join via Google Meet. It'll be in the Dev Edmonton Society channel on the Slack. And that's the overarching society that deals with all the meetups and tries to keep meetups together, and also interfaces really well with Startup Edmonton. As well, Dev Edmonton is going to have a board election in January, since it is a full Alberta society. So if you're interested in participating and volunteering for Dev Edmonton and doing board stuff, whether it be a director or we're looking for finance and stuff like that, anything along those lines, or you know people who want to get experience doing that, that helps too. All right. So now we're on to jobs. So if you want to promote a job, we'll invite you up to the stage and you can come up and you can promote the job. I know there was one, so I'll just start with that. And I'll, on that note, we'll thank our sponsors. We thank Punchcard because they sponsor Exchange.JS. We thank Jobber, Iron Sights, and Startup Edmonton because we're using their Remo, and Remo's expensive. Yeah. Normally we'd use their offices, but you know. All right. So if you're interested in sponsoring Exchange.js, email us at sponsors@exchangejs.com. Our next meetup is January 7th, 2020, and that will be with the Ruby meetup, and we'll have a JavaScript talk and a Ruby talk, and they'll probably be related. Oh, yeah, that was last year. That was earlier. Later, we're going to meet on January 7th, 2021, because it'll be a new year and hopefully a better one.